Welcome to the bonus show. Many people waiting at the edge of their seat for Pat's COVID. My screen just went black for a second. That was weird. Pat's positive or negative COVID diagnosis. We still don't have it. Really a testament to the sad state of testing in the United States that it's been 3 days. You don't have your results yet.
Yeah, 3 days at this point. I'd imagine I get the results today.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I should have maybe done an at-home test as well as a PCR test. So then I would have at least had some idea of if I was positive or negative.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
then, of course, waited for the PCR test results. But I think regardless, even if I do test negative, I'm going to wait it out a few more days because given the fact that I have some symptoms, there's a chance that it would be a false negative.
Sure.
So I'll just wait it out. It's not too bad quarantining. Just focusing on work and maybe working out from home and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Just hunkering down for a little bit longer. It's not too bad, but we'll have to wait and see what the results are.
Particularly with Omicron, the home tests seem very, very suspect. Now, you do have symptoms. With asymptomatic Omicron, the home tests seem really unreliable. With symptomatic, I think they are more reliable. But in any case, I guess we'll know soon.
We've talked about how if you're vaccinated and boosted and you get Omicron, 75% of the time you're not going to have symptoms. I wonder if I do have it, if I do fall into that 25% of people who do get symptoms, or maybe if those numbers are off.
I think that's a misunderstanding of the data. No. So the 75% is if you're boosted, you have a 75% protection against symptomatic Omicron. That doesn't mean 75% of cases are asymptomatic. But in any case, you have symptoms. So I don't know what we learned from that.
So then if I walked into a room with a bunch of people who had Omicron, I would be 75% protected? Is that what you're saying? Instead of
no. It's kind of complicated to explain. Let's first see if you're positive, and then we'll assess probabilities of it being the scenario that it is.
We'll take it from there.
We'll take it from there. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the U.S.-Russia talks. We heard such boisterous speculation about what would happen at these U.S.-Russia talks. They've taken place. There was no progress made on the issue of tensions over Ukraine, and the talks have ended. There were several hours of calls yesterday, 7 hours, in fact. There were no specific negotiations. They are reportedly no closer to resolution over the fear that Russia's going to attack Ukraine, invade Ukraine. And there were press conferences yesterday after the talks. Officials on both sides said they were constructive. And the next step is a round of negotiations, or of conversation rather, at NATO's headquarters tomorrow. Now, Pat, I am very open to the idea that this is all kind of action from Putin to get a reaction and maybe use that as leverage. I am totally open to the idea that Putin doesn't really plan to invade Ukraine, but there are people denying that Russia has even moved military assets to the border. There doesn't seem to be any credible reason to question that at this point. We have the satellite. Russia has moved troops to the border. The question is it real in terms of its intent to invade, or is it a ruse of some kind?
Yeah, I doubt that there's any immediate attempt to invade or any plans to invade. Maybe this is the type of thing where they want to play a long game. So they move the troops, and then 6 months down the road, a year down the road, that's when they choose to actually move the troops in. But it seems like maybe some of the concessions that Putin wants are to get it so that Georgia and Ukraine never join NATO.
Right.
And maybe just the threat of putting troops on the border of Ukraine is enough to get that concession, because obviously we're very war weary and nobody wants to be going to war, especially with Russia, such a major force. And not at this time when we just ended this 20-year conflict in Afghanistan, and most Americans don't want to do anything having to do with war in these foreign countries anymore. So, yeah, that's probably what they're trying to do. And Putin knows that he can take advantage of this situation now and flex while he can. I think that's probably what we're seeing here.
At the same time, a different interpretation would be, if you don't want NATO to believe they need to accept Ukraine in terms of shared defense, don't make it seem like they're going to have something to defend themselves from, right? Like that would be another plausible interpretation, which is if you don't want Ukraine in NATO, don't mass troops at the border, making it seem like NATO might actually have to come to Ukraine's defense. I don't know. I could see both interpretations.
And I also wonder what an actual invasion of Ukraine by Russia would look like, because I think in our minds we picture troops just walking through the country, sort of like we've seen before. You know, you think back to like World War II era,
Yeah.
where you have Nazis crossing Belgium or something like that. I don't know if it would necessarily be something like that, or if it would more be places in Ukraine that are more Russia friendly, Russia speaking, maybe elements of their government that are more Russia friendly would welcome in Russian troops, and so that they're like speaking to one another and then they're welcomed in. And maybe they just spend enough time there where they can slowly take power from within, and then once they've taken over the Russian speaking areas, then they can sort of consolidate and eventually persuade other parts of the country to join them. Like maybe that's what we would see there, sort of like a slow movement rather than a
I
full
don't
on
know.
attack with guns firing and everything like that.
I agree that using a 70-year-old framework for what it would look like, 80-year-old, is probably inaccurate. I don't really know what it would look like. And of course, I'm hopeful that it doesn't happen. So that's the latest. And then tomorrow there will be the next round of discussions at NATO headquarters. And maybe by Thursday, we'll have more information for you. This is an incredible story. A Maryland man has now lived 3 days with a pig's heart beating inside his chest. The surgery took place at Maryland Medical Center. This was a gene-edited pig used as an organ donor. The recipient is Dave Bennett, 57 years old. He is the first human to risk this experimental surgery. It was a 9-hour surgery where doctors replaced his heart with one from a 1-year-old, 240-pound pig, gene-edited and bred exactly for this. The recipient is breathing on his own without a ventilator. He is on an ECMO machine, which does about half the work of pumping blood throughout his body. And he'll hopefully be slowly weaned off of that, where the pig's heart will do all of the work of pumping the blood throughout his body. This is something that has been theorized for so long. Use animal organs to save human lives. There's more than 100,000 people waiting for organ transplants. Side effects, symptoms, many die waiting in vain for someone else to die, quite frankly, so that they can get an organ. Pigs have organs that are very similar to humans. And obviously, if you could start breeding pigs for organ transplants, it would be an incredible thing in terms of saving life. It's called xenotransplantation, and this is a major, major leap forward. Now, what happens in 5 days? What happens in 10 days? We don't know. This is not a guy who's out of the woods, I think is important to mention.
Yeah, this guy is essentially a guinea pig in this experiment.
How long have you been waiting for that?
I just came up with it, so, just a few minutes. But yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, I mean, as you point out, more than 100,000 people sit on these organ transplant wait lists, and about 6,000 people a year die waiting for an organ that just never comes, be it a heart or a kidney or a lung. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really not scalable, I think, especially when there are these other options to have it be so you have to have someone die suddenly in order for them to become an organ donor.
Yes.
If you can make it so that pigs or these other animals are raised, even if they are gene edited, and even if it's not the most moral thing necessarily, if you can maybe sort of substitute the current system that we have for that, I think that's definitely a step in the right direction.
So that's an interesting point, though. You're vegan, you don't eat pork. I am not vegan. I don't eat pork. What is your sense of this in the context of veganism? Because you've got to gene edit and raise the pig. And then, of course, you've got to kill the pig when you take the heart.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great, but I think you have to be on team human at the end of the day.
Wow.
Right? So if this is going to extend this person's life, who knows, 15, 20, 30 years, then you have to sort of take a utilitarian approach and say that you're for it. It's just unfortunate how in the meantime, there's probably going to be a lot of trial and error, and a lot of pigs are going to be killed needlessly, and maybe some of those organs won't be put to good use. But I mean, that is the scientific process after all. We do this for so many different things already, and I think it's unfortunate in a way, but I think overall it does good.
So, in other words, and I agree with you if this is your view, you see it as different, where humans can easily survive without eating pork.
Yes.
But absent someone dying and giving you an organ, this is actually a way where, absent the pig heart, a lot of people would actually die.
Yeah, it's a matter of necessity. In the same way, if you were starving in the woods and you couldn't find any fruits or vegetables to eat, but there were some wild pigs running around, I would support your right to go and kill that pig to eat it. So if someone needs a pig heart to live and they otherwise are going to die from it, I feel like it's okay to kill the pig in order to take the heart from the pig. That's just my sort of assessment of it.
There it is, blog.patford.com/pigs. You can find more about that. No, I'm kidding. No, that's interesting. I think that there's a lot of vegans who would agree with you, and I think that there are many who would not.
Yeah, that's probably fair to say.
Yeah, which is probably true on almost any topic with any group. But an incredible achievement. Now the hope is we get past 3 days, and we get to 7, and then we get to 30, and that this is someone now that can live a long life. That would be an incredible thing, and we'll keep following that. Senator Jon Ossoff is going to introduce a bill barring members of Congress from trading individual stocks. This is something Nancy Pelosi has already said she is not interested in. Senator Jon Ossoff says that's exactly what he's interested in. It would apply to members currently serving in office and their immediate families. It turns out that the Stock Act, which is sort of meant to prevent these types of conflicts of interest in terms of legislators acting on information they learn through their being legislators to make stock moves, there are dozens of lawmakers violating the Stock Act. And Senator Jon Ossoff is looking to sort of cut this off at a higher level by saying, if you're a member of Congress, you can't hold or trade individual stocks while in office. You can hold mutual funds. And mutual funds, the belief would be they react in a much more general way to whether the economy is doing well or not, whereas individual stocks can much more easily be the subject of manipulation through legislative decisions. I think that this is completely reasonable. I don't think it's going to pass. I don't think there's any interest in the majority of the House and Senate in doing this. But we've said for a long time, Pat, that the privileged positions that allow these members of Congress to find out about so many things, and it is rife for abuse, and we've seen it abused, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, this has to be done. It seems so incredibly obvious. It's interesting to see Jon Ossoff buck the trend, I suppose, or at least buck some sort of a Democratic leadership, because Nancy Pelosi, of course, was so against this.
Yeah.
And she's made an incredible amount of money off of her investments over the years. So I wonder if this will be seen as like the new Democratic position amongst most, and if this actually could get some traction. Obviously, you have to rely on lawmakers getting rid of their own power in some sense. And so are they going to be willing to do that? Probably not. You're probably not going to get the numbers in order to make this sort of thing pass.
Yep.
But, even if you say, okay, they can't have individual stocks anymore, there still can be plenty of conflict of interest. Like if you think about the COVID crash, for example, many of these lawmakers knew that there was going to be an economic calamity coming. And so, many chose to sell off many of the ETFs and mutual funds that they had, knowing that they could buy it back up cheaper after there was a crash. So even that is conflicting, right? Even that would be seen as bad, but I don't know how you necessarily go after that, because in a sense you'd have to say, okay, well, these members of Congress, they can only hold cash. They can't be invested in these other assets, which just doesn't seem all that fair.
Starts to seem sort of unreasonable, right? You could short the entire market through ETFs or mutual funds or whatever the case may be. The closing of the spousal loophole that Jon Ossoff is proposing is also interesting. Nancy Pelosi's husband has a massive stock portfolio in companies like Netflix, Alphabet, which is Google, Salesforce, Slack, etc. And without the spousal loophole, Nancy Pelosi or whoever, we're picking on her because she's known to have calls, puts, all these different things, and her husband very, very involved in stock trading. She could just go to him and say, hey, listen, you should buy this or you should sell this. She would technically be in compliance by not doing it herself. So closing that loophole seems important. I don't think Pelosi's being specifically targeted by Ossoff. It just so happens she would be swept up if a lot of these things were to be made law.
Yeah, are you surprised that she's not willing to at least say that she supports this? Because it's such a bad look, and she's already
That's
made her
what
money.
I said when she said it. It's not going to happen. Just pretend to support it so that you don't get criticized. And it's like I'm telling her to lie, which is weird to tell politicians to lie, but I'm starting from the point of they lie all the time. So why not just say you don't even have to tell a lie that's provable. You could just say I'm completely open to that. I don't know that we have the votes, but I'm open to it. It's never going to happen.
That's all you got to do. And even if you're in a position where you can actually make it happen, well, Nancy Pelosi herself, she's 80 plus years old now.
Is she really?
Yeah, hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm pretty sure. And so she's obviously in a position where this really wouldn't affect her all that much if the policy change was made because they've already made their money. What do they have to worry about?
Wow, she is 81. I figured she was 78 or something like that. Yeah, she's in her 80s. That is really something else. And Paul Pelosi, her husband, is also 81. Wow, interesting. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so very interesting proposal and one that I don't expect will actually pass. We will see what the future holds for Jon Ossoff's bill. And we will be back tomorrow with a new show and a new bonus show. Chess tournament today at 6 p.m. Eastern, davidpakman.com/chess. I'll be streaming. Are you going to play in the tournament, Pat?
Yeah, I'll play. I'm not going to do very good, though. I mean, I haven't played in over a year.
Yeah.
So I'll just play for fun, and maybe I'll win a game or two.
The problem is that there's going to be enough players where everybody will be matched up against people of roughly their skill level. So, like, whether you're good or not good, you'll have a shot at winning roughly half your games. It's kind of the way the tournaments are designed. And that you could say that that's good or you could say that that's bad. I don't know.
Wow, that's a lot of parity there.
Yeah.
Definitely incentivizes lower skilled players like me
Yes.
to join in on the tournament. So, yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And we'll see how we do. But I don't think we're going to win this thing.
No, I don't expect to win. No, and there's some very, very good players that are going to be playing. Okay, so we'll see some of you at 6 p.m. today. And then we'll be back with a new show, new bonus show tomorrow. I will be live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturday for the Trump rally out in Florence, Arizona. Should be pretty insane. But much earlier than that, we'll be back tomorrow.